My name's Helen Strudwick and I work at the Fitzwilliam Museum and I'm organising an exhibition of Egyptian coffins. We're standing next to a coffin of a man called Nespar Shefit, who lived around about 900 BC in ancient Luxor, that we now refer to as Thebes. And he was somebody who worked at the temple of Amun at Karnak. Many tourists have visited that place, so it'll be very familiar to people. And he was an overseer of craftsmen's workshops and overseer of temple scribes, so he's quite an important person at the temple. And it's reflected in the quality of the coffin that he's got. It's a really exceptionally good quality coffin of a type that we call yellow coffins. There are many of those, and they were almost all made for people who worked at that temple at that time. One of the interesting things about him in particular is that that set of titles that I've just given you were actually probably later titles than he originally had when the coffins were made for him, because very often where we see on the inscriptions on the coffins where he's named with his job titles, because he's very proud of the fact that he worked at that temple at that time, because it was such an important institution in Egypt. But they were obviously changed, the job titles, before he actually got into the coffin, where he died and was buried inside it. Because all over the coffin, wherever the titles appear, there is a darker patch of varnished where the inscriptions have been reinscribed, even right in the innermost coffin. So it was definitely changed before he was actually buried in the coffins. Now that suggests to us quite an interesting thing, that perhaps he was somebody who was very well prepared and had his coffins made in advance. And that's something that we've suspected that the ancient Egyptians did. That was to prepare their burials well in advance of their deaths. But this is the first time we've actually seen it on a coffin. So as I say, we've already suspected that people did that kind of thing, but now we can actually demonstrate it. All the colours that you can see on this coffin are the original colours, and the varnish on it is also original. It's not that we've touched it up or anything like that. The coffin's got a lot of inscriptions giving spells that help the dead person through into the afterlife. Some of those come from a text known as the Book of the Dead, which is quite well known from films like The Mummy, although it's not quite the way it functions as shown in there. It was a set of spells which helped you to get through difficult areas in the afterlife. There are also inscriptions praying to various gods and just trying to appease them and help you also to kind of have a good afterlife. Because the Egyptians were very much, when they were preparing for their deaths, they were preparing also for their lives to continue, because they had a good life actually, and they wanted that to go on. So it's quite an optimistic thing. It's not sort of a morbid thing that they were doing. They were preparing for a continued life.